Hello and welcome to the Merlin guide. This guide will be split into three sections. First section will be on building, second section will be on Merlin's passive abilities and their upgrade order, and the third section will be on fighting combos and general mechanical tips and tricks with Merlin. So the first section is the building. The relics you want on Merlin are beads and Aegis. Pretty simple, standard for nearly all mages. And his start, the current start on mages, this build might get outdated in the future, and if so I will put the most up-to-date build in the description. However, currently the best start on Merlin is to go Restored Artifact, which is tier 2 of these three items, and then a healing and a mana potion. Your start should look like this pretty much every game. Then your first back, you want to try and get Shoes of Focus. Again, currently Shoes of Focus are way better than Shoes of the Magi because they lost their penetration. The cooldown and mana here is far too useful. Then you can get Chronos Pendant. Sometimes, you know, if you're feeling a bit confident, you can go Rod of Duty is a major power spike. However, the far safer option is to go Chronos Pendant, because at this point in the game you're probably not sure of how the game is going to go in terms of how quickly you might be, you know, gaining a lead or losing a lead, etc.
With power comes
then,
temptation.
after you've got Chronos Pendant on your second back, you next want to try and get either Spear of Desolation or Divine Ruin. You want to get Divine Ruin, obviously, if the enemy have a lot of healing. So then you get Divine Ruin here. If they don't have any significant healing or lifesteal that you think you're going to need to be worrying about, Spear of Desolation here is a perfect choice. This will give you full cooldown. Obviously, if you go Divine Ruin, you'll only have 30% with these items, but let's just get Spear of Desolation for now. Then the next back is going to be, you can get these in parts, but you next want to get Soul Reaver. Soul Reaver right now is insanely strong because it's sort of the ultimate tank killing item. Its passive does a percentage of the enemy god's health, which obviously works better if the enemies have a lot more health. And also 10% magical penetration. Percentage magical penetration is most effective against tanks because they have a lot more protections. Then after Soul Reaver, you want to go into Charon's Coin. The 20% magical penetration here sort of speaks for itself. However, it's passive, you know, once you get it fully stacked, it becomes sort of even more effective. With Charon's Coin and Soul Reaver, you now have 30% magical penetration, including the 15 flat penetration from Spear of Desolation here. You can, if you are behind, I've seen Pretty Prime at least, going to Obsidian Shard. This is probably because Charon's Coin you're not going to be able to stack the passive, so Obsidian Shard can be a useful pickup here, if you don't think your team's really going to be able to stack this Charon's Coin for you. Then your final item is going to be Rod of Tahuti most of the time. It works well with Merlin's abilities, as we'll explain later. Then you're going to want to sell Shoes of Focus, by the Elixir of Speed obviously. And then, if you went Spear of Desolation here, you're going to want to get Ethereal Staff. Now this gives you 30% cooldown reduction here, however, because the potion of power now gives 10% cooldown reduction, you still hit that cap. Because you've got 30% here, plus the potion is giving you 10% there, 40%. However, in this build, if you went Divine Ruin here, you're going to want to get Soul Gem. This has 10% cooldown reduction on it. It's got a nice passive, you can read it, sort of figure out how to use it in game. It's a nice item with 10% cooldown reduction. If you don't want to go Soul Gem, maybe the enemy have a lot of anti-healing, you're not going to get any use out of the passive. You can obviously sell boots for Spear of Desolation here, and this will give you the 30% that you need in your build, plus the 10% from the power potion for 40%. And that is pretty much the build for Merlin. The next section is on Merlin's passive abilities and their upgrade order. So, first off, his passive, Overload. Every time Merlin casts a spell, he gains a stack of Overload. When Merlin fires his next basic attack, it will be augmented with lightning, dealing extra damage to the first enemy. So, after you use an ability, your next basic attack will deal bonus damage. Now this, you can sort of save up 3 charges of it, represented by these 3 crystals here.
You are outmatched, do you understand?
Just get a full cooldown reduction. Okay. So I'll just sort of demonstrate this with Merlin sort of one. So if I throw an ability, see I get that lights up there, I get a charge. And you can see 2 damage numbers there. That's showing off his passive. Then I'll go back to Arcane Stance. Merlin is a stance changer, but he's sort of unique in the fact that he has 3 different stances. I think first of all it would be useful to talk about Merlin's stance change first, and then we can go into his abilities. So Elemental Mastery is his stance change. Merlin taps into his inner potential, exploding with energy in the stance he's currently attuned to. During this time, Merlin can choose which stance he wants to enter next. After the explosion reaches its apex, which is its max distance, it collapses in on itself. Enemies are dealt damage from both the explosion and the implosion and suffer different effects depending on which stances they are hit by. So, as you can see, if I change from Arcane to Fire here, this is sort of the order they will be in. And to pick which stance you go into, you press the number on, like, so say if you wanted to go into Fire here, it would be 2. If you go into Ice here, it would be 3. However, if you just press it and don't press a number, it will just go to the next stance along, so almost like in a circle here. So if I were to change stance from Arcane to Fire, as you can see...
You are outmatched.
Oh, sorry, actually, I don't have it at level 5. Okay, there we go. Not level 5, sorry, I don't have a point in it. So when I have a point in it, you'll see... I'll just go from Fire to Arcane here. You can see it goes out, and then it goes in. I went to Ice. As you can see, sort of it does, like, it goes from Fire to Ice, and that's sort of like 2 ticks of damage, and obviously it's a different effect here. Now, they do this damage is done on both sides. However, if they are hit by fire, they will get hit with sort of a tick damage of fire. It'll be like applying a fire effect to them, a bleed, if you will. If they're hit by ice, they will get slowed for 1.5 seconds, and if they are hit by the arcane, they get knocked up. I'll just sort of demonstrate the ice and arcane here.
You are outmatched. You
can see they got knocked up on the arcane. And then obviously the fire, it's hard to demonstrate the slow, but you can see that the fire, sort of, they get hit by the ticks of fire. And that's sort of Merlin's ultimate. Now, the reason why I went over that first is because I needed to be able to explain the rest of his kit. Flicker, this ability does not change no matter what stance you're in. It's just a quick teleport to a distance in front of him. If I get that, you can see it's sort of a target. It's like a short-ranged blink, but it can be used in combat. You can see I do a short-range blink. So, in Merlin's arcane stance, his one is Eclipse. Merlin conjures an orb of condensed celestial energy that grows in size as it travels, dealing damage every 0.4 seconds and marking enemies hit. Enemies marked take additional damage if they stay within the outer range of Eclipse. So as you can see, it does an initial damage here, and then it does tick damage whilst they're inside it. As you can see, this targeter is kind of unique in the fact that if you put it closer to yourself, it's small, and you're probably not going to hit anybody with that. However, if you hit it further out, it sort of grows in size. And so enemies hit by this, you can see this sort of outer ring here. This shows that if they get hit by that center that's sort of spinning around, they would have to walk outside of this outer ring here. They'd have to step out of here to stop taking that damage. If somebody were to walk into his one, so if I were to go like this and walk into his one, I would have to go back out of there to be able to stop taking the damage. And that's Merlin's one in Arcane. His 2 is Vortex. Merlin deploys a field of arcane energy at a location. After a delay, the vortex deals damage and pulls enemies towards the center. As you can see, just a simple ring here. I'll just put this Odin on the edge. You can see, bang. It just pulls him into the center once it fully explodes. It's quite slow, so it can be quite difficult to hit. We'll get onto that. Then I'll change to Fire to show you his fire ability. So his one is Radiate. Merlin channels a beam of intense fire for 2 seconds that deals damage every 0.5 seconds. Each time Radiate hits an enemy, it also applies a burn, dealing additional damage over time. As you can see, it's sort of like a rectangle here. You You can see, it just deals fire damage. This will also apply the fire effect from his ult. So you can see this fire damage per tick here. This actually works with his fire stance. So the more you upgrade this, as you can see, there's two numbers popping up here. This 37 is represented by the ult damage here. 5 plus 32. 37, sorry. So his 1 will apply that, and his 2 will also apply that. Dragon Fire. Merlin summons forth 2 ethereal dragons that spout flames towards each other, dealing damage to enemies every 0.25 seconds. If caught in the centre of the fire, enemy gods have their protections reduced. The dragons last for 3 seconds. So as you can see here, sort of 2 kind of like cone looking things that will, so it summons dragons from the far side and they breathe fire into the centre. Now, this does not do double damage in the centre, it only reduces the protection. So, if somebody's caught here, they are taking effectively sort of the same damage as if they were caught in the centre. However, obviously in the centre they are getting their protections reduced. So, it is like taking more damage, but it's not double damage. And again, these two will apply this fire per tick damage. So, actually upgrading the ult makes your fire stance do more damage. And that's it for Merlin's Fire 1 and 2. Then onto his Ice stance. His Ice stance 1 is called Frostbolt. Merlin hurls a Frostbolt that explodes if it hits an enemy, dealing an additional 15% damage if they are slowed. So as you can see here, it stops on the first god hit, and it will do damage in an AoE round. So if I were to hit a god and there was another god standing next to them, like here for instance, all 3 will take the damage. That's Merlin's 1, it's pretty simple. Merlin's 2, Blizzard. Merlin creates a blizzard at a location that lasts for 4 seconds. For a brief delay, shards of ice start hurling down every 0.5 seconds. Enemies hit take damage and progressively get more slowed when they stay within the area. So as you can see, he puts his 2 down and it deals tick damage in the area. Enemies inside this are also slowed. So as you can imagine, you do your 2 to slow them and then do your 1 to deal additional damage. And that covers sort of Merlin's abilities. I'll just show you sort of the level 1 start and then we'll get into the full upgrade order. So the level 1 start on Merlin, I'll just reset my level. Go over here. I'll sell most of my items so I don't deal a ridiculous amount of damage to the camp. I'll just get some. I'll just get the standard start on Merlin actually.
With power comes temptation.
So obviously you're going to be hitting the speed buff. You can fire this over the wall at the speed buff, and you basically just want to throw it and then run to lane. Then I'll show you what you would do in lane. So as you're walking to lane, as soon as you start throwing your 2 down, this has a fairly long cooldown at the start. As you can see, the cooldown here is 16 seconds. It's unlikely you're going to be able to cast that again very quickly. So what you do is, as soon as you've casted it on that speed camp, you switch into fire stance. And then as you go towards the lane, the minions will sort of already be about to meet up here. You start basic attacking the minions, and then you put your 2, like this, in fire, and it manages to hit all of them. Then you can just use basic attack to finish each one of them off. Then, after you've cleared that wave, you will then be level 2, okay? And once you're level 2, you have to make a decision whether you want to go to the enemy red buff or your red buff. The safest bet is to go to your red buff. If you're going to your red buff, you would be level 2 here, and you would get your 1 next. Then, obviously on the fire, in the fire stance, you would want to place your 2 and 1 down on the fire camp. Now, now depending on how quickly you clear the first wave, your fire 2 probably won't be up yet, so you'll have to use your 1, and then maybe some basic attacks, and then eventually, you know, your fire 2 will come back up, and you'll be able to clear it. So that's sort of the level 1 and 2 start on Merlin, just sort of how to play him. Then I'll just show the upgrade order. So, actually, it'd be better if I just go by each level.
The elements are mine to control.
So obviously, you saw 2, then 1. Then, your next level, on level 3, you want to get your 1 again. Then, to get your 3, it's your main escape. Then, you want to get your ult, so you start doing the pulsing damage each time, sort of an extra ability there. Then, you just want to simply max your 1, and then your 2. So no more points into your roll or anything else, just your 1, and then your 2. Then you can start putting the extra points into your ult, and then obviously putting the points into your 3, because your 3 only reduces the cooldown on it. And that's Merlin's upgrade order. So 2 points in the 1, 1 point in the 2, 1 point in the 3, 1 point in the ult by level 5, then max the 1, max the 2, then start maxing the ult and 3. And that is it for Merlin's passive abilities and their upgrade order. So now onto Merlin's fighting combos and general mechanical tips and tricks with him. So the first tip is to have your 3 on instant casting. I used to have it on quick casting, however instant casting is far quicker than quick casting, and with your 3, most likely you are never really going to want to be doing it on the spot. It's not very useful. Most of the time you're going to want to be doing it at the max range to try and get out. So I would have it on instant casting. And then say if you get surprise blinked on by an assassin or somebody like that. So say if it's Susano, Merlin can be quite strong into Susano, I find, because of this. If a Susano blinks and then tries to use his 2 doesn't pull instantly, so you actually have time to do a 180 flick and get some distance between you to get out of the range of his 2. And that's why I like it on instant casting. Then for general wave clear in mid, you're obviously going to want, you know, to basic attack the minions, and then now to just putting your 2 down on them, and then trying to get your 1 in the middle. So you want to try and hit the archers with the 1, I would suggest. Especially if you manage to get them grouped up. So they're respawning now. If you do try and get them grouped up, you're actually able to hit both of them. Obviously these melee archers would obviously be pushed into the circle, and they would all be hit by your 1 because it does that AoE. I'm going to explain one of Merlin's biggest strengths in Conquest. Similar to our Pwash, he's very, very good for defense. And what do I mean by defense? I mean, when the enemies are coming for your phoenixes and sieging them, he's very good at defending. So your phoenix defenses, your tower defenses, those kinds of things, Merlin is quite strong. Now, why is Merlin strong? Well, not only does he have very, very good lane clear for clearing minions, and very quickly, and on a short cooldown once he has max cooldowns, so the enemies are effectively going to have to go in at one point without any minions. You know, they will never have the luxury of having minions. And then also, Merlin has some of the best poke in the game, and some of the most easily confirmable poke. In his ice stance, because obviously your 2 slows, you don't need to get much damage off in your 2. All you need is for it to hit them once at least and slow them, and then throw your 1. They'll be slowed, so your 1 is easier to hit, and your 1 will do bonus damage. And this is why most of the time when I play Merlin, personally, I like to stay in my ice stance. I think it's extremely strong in most situations. We'll just sort of get a bit of my sort of build back here. That do I? And that is already. Just stack my current coin. That's a very ear-piercing sound. So the general sort of fighting with Merlin is again poking 2, then into 1. Very effective poke, because not only does it do a ton of damage, quite confirmably, and on extremely low cooldown. I'll just actually show the cooldown of his 1. It's extremely short for what it is. Yes, 4.2 seconds. It's almost as short as a Hebo 1, but on a sort of far longer range, and actually will do similar damage. Hebo's 1 will do a slightly a bit more damage, but if you slow them and then hit them, again, that's like 600 damage there. It's like 700 if you combine the 2. And this 2 is on an 8.4 second cooldown, so you can actually throw your 2-1 and get sort of like another 1 off on somebody else maybe, and then wait for the to come back up, and then 1. And if you time your Chronos Pendant passive right, you can easily get off those 2 1s as quickly as possible. So general fighting is poking with the ice stance for most of the time, and then when you finally want to go in to kill someone, most of the time I like to save my 3 for escapes. However, if you are very confident that you can use it aggressively, you can do. To say if I was poking someone out, I got them low, I will blink into them, change into fire, and then use my 2-in-1 in fire. Because your fire will absolutely melt any squishy late game, and it even melts a lot of guardians as well. Especially once you're full build with all of this penetration and Soul Reaver and Rod of Tahuti. He does an insane amount of damage with this. So arcane stance, switching to arcane stance, most of the time you're going to want to do this if your team is lacking in CC, or you think it would be a good use for chasing. Because obviously the range on your 2-and-1 in fire isn't very good. Remember, you're going to be in your ice most of the time. If you manage to poke someone down very low with your ice 2-and-1, but they are still like out of range, because again, this is extremely long and safe poke. Like, you're well over the basic attack range with these abilities. Like, look how far that goes. That goes 70 units. Basic attacks, obviously, you can see here, are about 55 units. If you're doing your 2-in-1 at max range, you know, they might get low, but you don't want to use your blink, aggressively to catch up to them and do the fire. If you don't want to do that, a good option might be throwing your 2-in-1, switching into arcane, and then throwing your arcane 1 and 2. You want to throw your 1 in arcane before your 2, because you want to sort of get the initial damage with the 1 out, and then as they're sort of escaping the 1, see if they're sort of get hit by it and they're on their edge, you can pull them back in towards it. Kind of hard to show on this Odin bot because he isn't moving, and that one does move a bit too slow. But just obviously, if they're that's there, then you can obviously pull them back in to the middle with that, make them take even more ticks. And your arcane stance has about the same range as your ice. The only reason why you use your ice for poke over the arcane is because it's on a much lower cooldown, realistically, and the damage is a lot more easily confirmable.
Do you understand?
To note about the arcane stance, remember the arcane sort of effect when you go into it is a knock-up. This is very effective if, say, a jungler or somebody like that ganks you or sort of dives on top of you, and you want to interrupt on their abilities. A very good example of this is Ratatoska 2. If Ratatoska is channeling his 2 on you, if you switch into arcane stance, that knock-up will cancel his 2. It could also cancel Chiron's 3, his escape as well. So you could use it to interrupt that and to lay chase. But it won't work on most channeling abilities. So abilities like Anubis's 1, Ares' 3, Heimdall's 2. A lot of channeling abilities like those tend to be knock-up immune. You know, Thor's 3, for instance. And that's when you want to sort of use your fire and just stand inside your fire. Because for them to hit you, they have to be standing inside. And if you're effectively moving around inside your fire, and sort of juking inside the fire, they have to stay inside the fire. So say if they were sort of on the other side, you want to stay at the opposite side of the fire to them, so they have to walk through it to get to you, and sort of walk around inside it. You can do the exact same thing with your ice. Your ice is a lot easier to move around in, because it's got such a large area. You can almost think of it a bit like a mini arena to move around in and keep the enemy as far away from yourself as possible. However, obviously most of the time you are going to be staying in ice stance, because ice stance and fire stance are just so strong. Remember, ice stance for poke, fire stance for a quick sort of changing into them and then killing them like that. A lot of people will get caught off guard by the amount of damage the fire stance does. And it's especially useful if the enemies have no way to interrupt your fire 1. It does insane damage like that, and a lot of tanks will often get taken off guard by the amount of protection reduction he does, because remember, it's percentage protection reduction. That can, you know, obviously do quite a lot to tanks. But we'll just show you sort of as a final little bit just how much damage sort of Merlin does late game. He gets progressively better the longer the game goes on, because he needs cooldowns. He needs items like a Rod of Tahuti, and these items just allow him to do insane power. We'll sort of show you this. Dead. And I'll just show you it again. I'll just show you the fire 2-and-1 actually, just so you get a really, really good idea of just how sort of just how much like damage she actually does. Okay, here I'll just reset my cooldowns. Obviously, again, Merlin has like such low cooldowns that I probably didn't even really need to do that. So I'll just change into my fire. So this guy is full health right now. You know, it's a Rabot late game. He represents a late game mage. Most mages will not have any type of protections against you. Obviously, dead. He's killed that easily before my fire one has even finished. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I might start uploading a few more gameplays or gameplay explanations like my Mercury one. I hope you did enjoy that as well. But thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. And I hope to see you doing well in my games as Merlin. Thanks for watching.